Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the nervous system a little more, specifically focusing on the peripheral nervous system, and we will also talk briefly about the endocrine system as well. So, you've learned about these different body systems probably since a relatively young age. You've learned about your skeletal system and your muscular system and your digestive system. So, we will just continue talking about these types of systems and specifically how they relate to psychology. So, starting with the nervous system, at this point, we've focused primarily on the brain. Know that with the nervous system, we can divide it into two main parts. So, we have our central nervous system, and this is kind of color coordinated, this slide. The central nervous system is going to essentially consist of the brain and the spinal cord. And again, those are made up of what we call interneurons. And it's the central nervous system that is processing information, interpreting information, and making decisions for the body. Whereas the peripheral nervous system, that is what's going to be branching out from the central nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system is going to be sometimes sending information toward the brain and sometimes receiving information from the brain. And so I say color coordinated. If you look here, the central nervous system is kind of this dark orange color, and you can see it runs along the center of the body. Whereas the peripheral nervous system, which is in kind of this gold color, are going to be all those nerves that branch out from the center. And as a reminder, the other types of neurons we've discussed, sensory and motor neurons, those are going to make up our peripheral nervous system. So let's go ahead and divide up our peripheral nervous system a little more. So it would be helpful to create a similar kind of flow chart in your notes so that you can organize the different parts of our nervous system. We have our nervous system at the top, as you can see there, and then the main division of your nervous system, the peripheral and the central. That's what we just talked about in the previous slide. We're not going to worry too much about the central nervous system at this point. All of our previous lectures about the brain, that all fits in the central nervous system, right? What we have in this green box and this green diagram. We've discussed that already. So now let's spend just a little bit of time talking about the peripheral nervous system. Here it's kind of that salmon color, and you can again see it branching out from the center. Our peripheral nervous system can be divided into two main types. Some of our peripheral nervous system is what we would call the somatic nervous system. And our somatic nervous system is going to be the parts of our nerves that are hooked up to voluntary movements. They're hooked up to the tendons and the muscles in our body that allow us to make the choice to move. So, moving across the floor of the classroom, moving your arms around, we call this your somatic nervous system. That might sound a little familiar. We talked previously about the word soma and how soma translates to body. Well, here it is again, somatic nervous system. These are the voluntary movements of your body. If you go out and you play softball, you play basketball, you ride a bicycle, this is going to involve moving the muscles and tendons of your somatic nervous system. Now, the other part of your peripheral nervous system is what we call your autonomic nervous system. And this can be kind of easy to remember because the word autonomic looks and sounds a lot like the word automatic, and that's a good way to think about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is going to be hooked up to the different glands and organs in your body that are essentially involuntary. I don't want to say that they're completely out of your control because to some extent you can control aspects of your autonomic nervous system. For example, your autonomic nervous system helps control the beating of your heart. Well, you can calm yourself and try to relax and slow down your heart rate, or you can think about something that just angers you and it can increase your heart rate. So they're not completely out of your control. However, they are involuntary. Your heart beating, your lungs breathing, your stomach digesting, you don't have to tell your body to do those things. They're just going to happen involuntarily. They are part of your autonomic nervous system. Now, there's a push and pull that happens in your autonomic nervous system, and you can see there's kind of one more division that takes place with our nervous system. So, specifically looking at the autonomic nervous system, recognize that sometimes we will arouse the nervous system. And one of the best ways to think about that is just think about your heartbeat. In a heightened state of arousal, alertness, fight or flight, then your heart is going to start racing. We call this your sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is going to be what prepares your body for action. It puts you into fight or flight. However, when the threat is gone, when you've escaped the threat or you've solved the problem or whatever it may be, you need to make sure that your heart rate can slow back down. That's the push and the pull. And so it's your parasympathetic nervous system that calms the body. So your sympathetic nervous system puts the body into high alert, fight or flight. The parasympathetic nervous system calms things back down. Now, moving over to the endocrine system, there's going to be some similarities that you see between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Both systems use chemicals to send messages. Both systems impact our thoughts and our behaviors, but they go about this in some different ways. So your endocrine system essentially is a series of glands that we find throughout our body. And what they do is they release chemicals into our bloodstream called hormones. So the nervous system will send neurotransmitters into a synapse. The endocrine system will release hormones into your blood. And it's important to differentiate these two systems because neurotransmission is fast. I mean, it's specific, it's rapid, it can tell my body to do very specific things. That's your nervous system. It can start and it can stop nearly instantly. But if a message is being released into your bloodstream, first of all, it's going to be widespread. It's going to travel throughout the entire body. It's also going to be a little bit slower to act and a little bit longer lasting. So think about it this way. If you are almost in a car accident, your ability to swerve the car real fast could be the result of neurotransmission and moving your arms really quickly. 30 minutes later, you may still be really worked up and kind of anxious and jittery. Well, you were likely feeling that way 30 minutes after the threat, not because of neurotransmitters in your brain, but instead there's likely adrenaline in your blood, and that adrenaline is still lingering. So you're still jittery 30 minutes later, even if the threat is over. Now, another big connection between our endocrine system and our nervous system is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is technically part of the nervous system because it's part of our brain. But the hypothalamus is going to be the part of our brain that controls the endocrine system. So it's the bridge between these two systems. Now, what does it specifically control? Well, primarily the hypothalamus is going to be in charge of the pituitary gland. And so you can see with our diagram there, as you travel up the brainstem, you have the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is going to rest right next to this very kind of small pea-sized gland in your brain called the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is often referred to as the master gland of the endocrine system. And the reason for this is the pituitary gland will release hormones that tell all the other glands in our body what to do. Without the pituitary gland, the endocrine system doesn't work. Now, the pituitary gland itself is going to release specific hormones, such as our growth hormone. So we release a lot of growth hormone when we are very young, right? 18 months to about 3 years, our pituitary gland is crazy active. During puberty, same thing, lots of growth hormone. And we also see a lot of activity in our pituitary gland when we sleep. In deep sleep, we release a lot of this growth hormone as well. So the pituitary gland is going to regulate all of the other glands that make up our endocrine system. I'm going to back up for just a moment. You can see in this diagram here all of the different glands of the endocrine system. It's possible you could be asked a question about your thyroid. It's possible you could be asked a question about your pancreas, but honestly, it's unlikely. There are some glands of your endocrine system that are more heavily related specifically to psychology. Now, that includes the pituitary gland, which we just discussed, but it also includes your adrenal glands, which we're going to look at in just a moment, and then your sex glands, which we'll talk about in a later unit. So the only other one I want to discuss today are your adrenal glands, and I want you to make the connection between your adrenal glands and a neurotransmitter we discussed, which is norepinephrine. Your adrenal glands is essentially the hormonal version of this. you all are familiar with adrenaline. Your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys and they release adrenaline into your blood. And what it does is it produces energy for us so that we are ready to attack someone. We're ready to run away if there's a threat. It puts our body into fight or flight. And this is a really, really great survival technique. The problem is our body doesn't do a great job of differentiating threats. Your body will respond if someone's running at you to attack you in a very similar way to the way your body will respond if I simply give you a quiz. And so in our next lecture, we're going to talk about some of the implications of anxiety and stress, which are caused by these stress hormones: increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. Really great if we're trying to survive an attack, not necessarily great if we're just under a lot of stress because of relationships and school and things like that. But that's more for our next lecture. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know. And as always, good luck.